So I'm here with Dr. Meichenbaum, who needs no introduction, of course. He's considered by most as the Freud of cognitive behavioral therapy, a pioneer in science-based psychology. And today in particular, I want to look at a very interesting tool in his repertoire with a very interesting name. And I wonder if Dr. Meichenbaum could tell us more about that. His well-known and famous clock metaphor. What is that all about?
I appreciate the invitation to talk about this. One of the things that characterize expert therapists, and keep in mind that 25% of expert therapists get 50% better results and have 50% fewer dropouts. So one of the things that we found that characterizes expert therapists is the way in which they do psychoeducation. And here's an interesting challenge for your audience. From my perspective, the clients we see are essentially storytellers, homo narrans, not only homo sapiens. And we as therapists get paid to listen to people's stories. So the challenge is one that I've thought about a lot, is what is it about the stories that clients tell me as a therapist that's more beneficial than the fact that they could tell stories to significant others in their lives, their Mother Earth figures, their bartenders, their beauticians, and the like. So the answer that I've come to is not only am I an exquisite listener who shows great, accurate empathy, compassion, non-judgmental in listening to these stories, but I have a way of telling the story back to the client that's psychoeducational in nature. I want the client to appreciate that they inadvertently, unwittingly, and perhaps even unknowingly contribute to the kinds of problems that they're coming in with. I want them to understand the interconnection between the way in which they appraise events, which you'll see as I characterize as 12 o'clock in my metaphor, the accompanying feelings, thoughts, and behaviors, and how they inadvertently contribute to the interactions between these processes. So I think your most valuable tool as a clinician is the art of questioning. So one of the things that I've developed and found highly useful, especially with clients who have a whole variety of emotional challenges and who have a number of different psychiatric disorders. So this is a kind of transdiagnostic tool, is that I'm able to retell their story, get acknowledgement and embellishment as a result of my sharing this account. So this is a highly collaborative process. And as you will see on the accompanying figure of the clock, what I've done is to put up a kind of 12 o'clock. In fact, I actually use my hands in describing this to the client. I say to the client, it sounds to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, see if I picked up on, see if I'm in tune with, get that kind of acknowledgement. What I do is I put my hand at this imaginary 12 o'clock. And what 12 o'clock represents is internal or external triggers. This is what sets the client off in any particular setting. So the external trigger may be what someone said or did not say, what someone did or did not do. But 12 o'clock can also be an internal trigger. That is, it may be a flashback. It may be a sense of apprehension. It may be some kind of physiological urge for a drug, a yearning, or what have you. And I put that back in the lap of the client and say, have I picked up on, am I in tune with? Is that what indeed is going on here? Is that what set you off? And I ask for elaboration and consolidation of their description of that. I then slowly move my hand to 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
What's 3 o'clock? 3 o'clock are the accompanying feelings that people had in that particular situation. These may be primary or secondary emotions. They may feel anxious or tense. They may have a secondary emotion of being angry because they've been humiliated or rejected. So 3 o'clock is in fact the nature of the variety of affective responses that precede, accompany, and follow. Once again, I use the client's language and metaphors in order to capture exactly what it is that occurred in that specific situation. I'm also interested in whatever theories they have about their emotions. Some people feel they can't control their emotions, that once it blows, they can't do anything about it. So the theory about emotions is as important as the emotions per se as well.
Yeah.
I then
So if
move
I
my
had a,
hand down. I then move my hand down to 6 o'clock. And 6 o'clock are the nature of the automatic thoughts, the accompanying images that they have. They may be the thinking styles that they engage in, the kind of catastrophizing, the automatic thoughts that precede. They may even be the developmental schemas, the beliefs. I'm unlovable. No one cares. You can't trust anyone. The world is unsafe. So what I'm trying to do is to put back into their lap to see if I've captured what are the nature of the accompanying thoughts that were triggered at that 12 o'clock event. My behavior is not done as a therapist because I now move my hand up to 9 o'clock. And what's 9 o'clock? 9 o'clock are the exactly behaviors that they engaged in that particular situation, what they did or did not do. And moreover, 9 o'clock also includes the kinds of reactions of significant others in that situation. What have I just done? I've listened in a rather exquisite fashion to the accounts, the stories that my clients bring in with a specific example. I'm now helping the client break that particular anecdote into its component parts. Now, here comes the clever piece about this. Having gotten acknowledgement and descriptions from the client of these various components, I now put my hand at the imaginary 9 o'clock and I move it around this imaginary clock without finishing the sentence.
Yeah.
I say to the client the following. It sounds to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, see if I picked up on, see if I'm in tune with, and I put my hand at the imaginary 9 o'clock and move it around the clock without finishing the sentence. Now, if you try this with your clients, I could assure you that there's a remarkably high probability that they will finish the sentence and say cycle or circle. Now, if you have tried this and you get to 6 o'clock and they have not said cycle or circle, you should say it. You don't sit there going, sounds like small word, 2 syllables. Come on, fellow, we can get this, okay? This is not charades, okay? This is psychotherapy.
Absolutely.
Once they get acknowledgement, once they say the word cycle or circle, it is your job to then merely reflect back and say back to them, it's a vicious, how did you put it?
Cycle.
Cycle or circle.
Circle.
And at this point, you can now go back and re-examine the nature of the presenting description. You can now say, are you saying to yourself that when this occurs at 12 o'clock, you do what at 9 o'clock? And then it makes you feel how at 3 o'clock? And then you have the thought of at 6 o'clock? And then makes you even more vigilant about 12 o'clock? You see, there is no story that you will ever hear from your client or from a relative, okay? You cannot break down into 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 9 o'clock.
I totally agree. And
Note
this what,
and note,
yeah,
and if I may just add one more thing,
yeah,
note that I put feelings before thoughts,
yeah,
okay, in this particular scenario. Because people are responsive to the nature of the feelings, and then we could see that thoughts and feelings are two elements of the same.
yeah,
I have found that this kind of process is valuable. And one last item is, once I've engaged the client in this process, I tell the client, don't change anything. We're only at the point of understanding. So I encourage and challenge the client to self-monitor, to collect data on whether in fact this clock applies to their situation. So we arrange for the client to collect data using the clock metaphor. And they bring in data and say, you know, doc, I do it. And I say, you do what? And they say, I do the vicious cycle. And when they say they do the vicious cycle, I say, if you do that, what is the impact? What is the toll? What is the price you and others pay? So I ask the question, impact, toll, and price you and others pay all the time. And moreover, if that in fact is the price and toll, what do you think we, Therapeutic Alliance, what do you think we could do about it? The client does not have to be a rocket scientist to say that one of the things he or she should do is break the cycle.
Yeah.
And I say, break the cycle, that's interesting. And then I ask the question, how are you presently breaking the cycle? Therefore, whatever their presenting problem is, substance abuse, avoidance, self-injury, whatever it is, they can now see that that is their way of breaking the cycle. It's not that they're crazy or sick, but for whatever developmental reasons, they have chosen ways of breaking the cycle that actually exacerbate and make their situation worse. Here's the really, really good news. They're in the presence of a therapist, you, the therapist, who can help them learn more adaptive, functional ways of breaking the cycle. Now, I went through this rather quickly, and
that was very clear.
In a moment, I'll describe how we apply this with regard to running groups as well.
So this was, I'll tell you, before we go down that road, I'll tell you why I was so eager to jump in there and talk to you, because this is exciting for me. I mean, I've been working with your methods. You've been a mentor and an inspiration for my 35 years of career in mental health. So this I find this an incredible tool. And one of the reasons is because it develops an awareness. It almost a meta-awareness. It develops this ability to start thinking about your actions and your thoughts, developing an ability to be more aware of your triggers, of feelings associated with those triggers, thoughts associated with those feelings, behaviors associated with the thought, and all this connection. And it's also easier to remember. It's a simple, it's the clock. Everybody knows what a clock is. Everybody knows the numbers on the clock. So I find it somehow it externalizes almost the problem. It helps the individual look at their problem in the context of a vicious cycle. So it's away from their mind and bodies a little bit, gives them a breathing space to think about it. I think for so many reasons, this is an incredible, like you rightly put it, transdiagnostic tool that can be used with anybody. Any situation can be broken down in these components.
Yeah, you're welcome to use that. There are two other features of this that's worth my commenting on, okay?
Yeah.
The second is how I use this on a group basis.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And then the second is you can not only have a vicious cycle, okay, but you can have a virtuous cycle.
Yeah.
So in fact, when people came in and say, Doc, it works, I can now use the clock in order to get them to take credit for the change.
Yeah.
So if we're going to do this as a complement, let me just do these other two segments and then you could use it as you wish. The clock metaphor that I just described to you can also be used in terms of my doing work with groups. I have supervised a lot of people who run groups, and in fact, they don't run groups. They tend to do one-on-one with clients, while everyone has an opportunity, other group members, to sit back and listen in. The clock metaphor provides a unique opportunity to create a group. In fact, if you look at the data on the effectiveness of group therapy, the level of group coherence is in fact the best predictor of outcome. In the same way that therapeutic alliance is the best predictor of individual therapy, group coherence, the sense of identity, the shared explanation, the mutual help are all seen as therapeutically. How can I use the clock to enhance the likelihood of group coherence? So I could actually turn to various group members and do 12 o'clock across the entire group. I could say, let me see if I understand. So what got you going was, and what set you off was, and the trigger for you was. So I am now going to do 12 o'clock across the entire group. I could then take a moment and ask them, what, if anything, do the various kinds of external and internal triggers have in common that they share? Moreover, I could explore with these group members what accompanying feelings preceded, accompanied, and followed that particular event. And moreover, I can not only ascertain the nature of the feelings, I could view their feelings like a commodity. What is it they do with those feelings? Do they stuff them? Do they drink them away? Do they act out upon them? And if they do that with their feelings, what is the impact? What is the toll? What is the price they pay? And do these various members of the group have a similar way of sharing their feelings? What's their theory about those feelings of anger and anxiety and depression, the sadness that they've experienced? So I can now have an occasion to have the group discuss the quality and nature and impact of those 3 o'clock primary and secondary emotions. Moreover, we can now look at the content of the 6 o'clock. That is, what are the automatic thoughts that preceded, accompanied, and followed that event? What were the particular thinking processes that they engaged in that acted like traps? Or in fact, what is the baggage, the kind of developmental schemas and beliefs that they have that also come into play with regard to 6 o'clock? Now note that I'm doing this among the entire group. And we could ask, what, if anything, did they do with those feelings? I'm now up to 9 o'clock. I can now ask, what did they do, each of them, and how did people respond? And if they responded in that way, what conclusions did they draw about themselves and others? So once again, I think the clock is a useful tool, transdiagnostic tool that can not only help people appreciate the interconnection between how they praise events, 12 o'clock, accompanying feelings and thoughts, 3 and 6 o'clock, and the accompanying behaviors and resultant consequences. We could have the group members actually collect data as to whether, in fact, the clock applies to their particular situations. This sets the occasion for subsequent meetings about if, in fact, they're doing that, what is the impact, toll, and price? And moreover, what can we do? And they would, as a group, come up and say they need to break the cycle. Well, can we start with breaking the cycle right here in the group? Where and how can we apply it out there? And that gets me into an entire discussion of how to bolster generalization and transfer of what we're doing. Once again, I invite you to try this clock metaphor. And in fact, the picture of the clock is something that we post. And we, in fact, teach the clients how to do the clock with significant others in their lives. So my goal in therapy is to put myself out of business and to turn these people into emotional detectives and becoming their own kinds of therapists. Once again, I challenge and invite you to try this kind of clock metaphor. There's one other example concerning the use of the clock that's worth my commenting on, and that is how to use the clock to make sure people actually take credit for the changes that they've engaged in. Thank you for your interest and enjoy the clock.
Thank you.